My name is Valerie Rowan, and I was 34 years old, the year I finally understood what emotional starvation felt like. There is a kind of loneliness that lives under your skin, the kind that grows quietly while you lie in your own bed next to your boyfriend and listen to him whisper comfort into the phone at 1 in the morning. Comfort meant for another woman. The woman was Marissa Vega, my boyfriend, Chris Miller's sensitive artist best friend. She always had a crisis, a meltdown, or a spiritual collapse happening. On those nights, Chris shielded the glow of his phone as if the screen contained state secrets, whispering words of reassurance to her while pretending not to notice me staring at the ceiling beside him. Every time he did it, something inside me eroded a little more. In our 2-bedroom apartment, I paid the rent, the utilities, and the groceries. I stocked the fridge with the organic ingredients Chris insisted on, even though Marissa ended up consuming most of it. She practically lived on our couch barefoot on my furniture, playing my PlayStation, eating the meal-prepped lunches I made for my long shifts as an architect. She treated my home like a communal sanctuary provided for her spiritual journey, and Chris defended her every invasion of my boundaries. Anytime I voiced a concern, he turned it into a moral failing on my part. If I asked why she never contributed to groceries, I was cold. If I asked why she stayed in our living room 6 nights a week, I was possessive. If I questioned why she used my Amazon account without asking, I was controlling. Chris always said the same thing. Marissa is a deeply feeling person, Valerie. You have stability. She doesn't. Why can't you just be generous? The word generous became a weapon he wielded against me for years. Meanwhile, Marissa, unemployed by choice at 28, floated from hobby to hobby, calling herself a consultant while draining every resource around her. Chris adored her chaos, her neediness, her constant vulnerability. I used to believe he adored me too. Over time, I realized he didn't love me as a partner. He loved the foundation I provided for both of them. The breaking point arrived quietly on a day I had planned to celebrate. I had just landed the biggest architectural commission of my career after 6 months of work, and the bonus was enough to clear my student loans or even put a down payment on a house for Chris and me. I brought home an expensive bottle of champagne, excited to share the news and talk about our future. Instead, when I stepped inside, the apartment was dark, silent, suffocating. Chris Miller and Lila Hart were sitting on the floor, surrounded by used tissues, both looking devastated. My heart lurched. I thought someone had died. Chris, I asked, setting my bag down. What happened? His face was red and blotchy. It's Marissa, he said, voice cracking. Before I could process fear, he continued. Daniel dumped her. He kicked her out. He humiliated her online. She's at a bar right now, and she said she doesn't see the point of anything. I blinked. Marissa and Daniel had dated for 3 weeks. I tried to keep my voice calm. That's awful, but... Valerie, she has abandonment issues, Lila snapped. She's in crisis. Chris stood up, desperate and frantic. She needs to get away. Somewhere warm. Healing. Somewhere with a wellness center. I've been looking at flights Cabo, maybe Tulum. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. Does Marissa have the money for that trip? He stared at me like I had asked a ridiculous question. She's an artist. She has nothing. She's literally homeless right now. So where is she staying tonight, I asked, though I knew exactly what he'd say. Here, Chris said, on the couch, until we leave. I repeated. Yes, he insisted. I promised her she wouldn't go through this alone. I told her we would take her away. The silence between us thickened. I watched him work up the courage for the real demand. And since you just got that bonus, he added carefully, it's perfect timing. Something inside me shifted like a camera lens snapping into focus. What exactly are you asking me to do? I asked, though I already knew. Chris took a breath. You're paying. For a moment, I couldn't hear anything except my own heartbeat. Chris, the man I had supported emotionally and financially, was standing in front of me with absolute faith that my role in his life was to fund a luxury spiritual retreat for another woman while he played the hero at her side. He waited for anger, for tears, for anything. Instead, I felt something colder, calmer, a clarity I had been denying for years. You're right, I said softly. Chris looked stunned. I've been selfish. Marissa deserves a break. We all do. Relief flooded his face so quickly it was almost painful to watch. He lit up with excitement, almost giddy with victory. Oh my God, Valerie, I knew you'd understand. He grabbed his keys. I'll go pick her up and tell her the good news. Can you order her favorite sushi? Of course, I said. He didn't kiss me. He didn't say thank you. He ran out of the apartment like a man rushing back to the woman who truly mattered. When the door shut, the apartment fell completely silent. I stood there breathing in the stillness. Then I walked to the door, turned the lock, and felt something in my lungs expand for the first time in months. I opened the champagne I had bought to celebrate a future with Chris Miller, and instead drank to the future I was about to build without him. The moment the door closed behind Chris, I finally let myself breathe. The apartment was silent in a way it had not been for months. No constant chatter, no forced laughter, no Marissa drifting around like smoke, just stillness, real peaceful stillness. I poured myself a slow glass of champagne, the same bottle I'd brought home to celebrate my professional triumph hours earlier, and let the cold bubbles settle the shaking in my hands. It tasted like clarity. For 2 years, I had felt like a guest in my own home, walking around Marissa's emotional needs and Chris's endless excuses. But as I took another sip, an unmistakable truth crystallized. They had taken my generosity for entitlement. They believed my stability existed for their consumption. And if I stayed, I would spend the rest of my life financing someone else's chaos. There was only one rational response left. I set the champagne glass down, walked to the front door, and locked the deadbolt. Then I rolled up the sleeves of my blouse and moved with the cold, deliberate precision of someone cleaning up the remnants of a crime scene, the crime being the quiet erosion of myself. I didn't start with clothes. I started with the things that mattered, the things that represented real investment from me. The 65-inch OLED TV I bought for the Super Bowl, the PS5 and controllers, including the greasy one Marissa liked using the espresso machine that Chris always bragged about, but had never paid for the Dyson vacuum cleaner, the blender, the toaster, the high thread count Egyptian cotton sheets. I boxed everything neatly, methodically. I didn't care about the objects themselves. I cared about reclaiming what had been mine. These things weren't shared assets. They were subscriptions to a service that Chris had decided to cancel the moment he volunteered my money to another woman. Next, I opened my laptop and pulled up my banking app. I transferred exactly half of our joint savings, the exact amount I had contributed over 2 years, into my personal external account. I removed my card from every shared platform Chris and Marissa enjoyed, the food delivery apps, the streaming accounts, the shared Amazon profile. Then I canceled the Spotify family plan and every other subscription tied to my card. The longer I worked, the lighter I felt. I called our landlord, Mr. Henderson, who had always liked me because I actually fixed things instead of bothering him with small maintenance issues. When he answered, I explained that I needed to break the lease immediately. Today, he said, "Valerie, you're on the lease until August." "I know," I replied calmly. "I'm sending the full penalty fee now. 2 months' rent. But I need my name off the lease tonight. Chris will be the sole tenant from here on out." "Does he know you're leaving?" he asked. "He'll find out in about an hour," I said, already walking to the bedroom to retrieve my passport and documents. Mr. Henderson grunted. "As long as the money clears, the place is his problem. But if he misses rent, he's out." "That's fair," I said. After transferring the penalty fee, I called the utility companies. Every bill was in my name. I scheduled the disconnect for the following morning. I wasn't petty. I didn't want Chris and Marissa to walk into darkness. But waking up in it, that felt instructional. At the 90-minute mark, the apartment looked hollow. Not messy or chaotic, just empty, stripped of warmth. I packed 2 suitcases with my clothes, laptop, personal documents, and essential items. I left all of Chris's belongings untouched. I didn't want anything of his. I especially didn't want anything of Marissa's, her meditation cushions, her crystals that never seemed to repel bad energy, her journals full of affirmations about abundance written while she drained mine. Before leaving, I paused in the kitchen, where I had once imagined a future with Chris. I pulled out a piece of the heavy cream-colored cardstock Marissa used for her daily vibrational notes and wrote neatly with a black marker, "Marissa is single now. So are you. You can cheer each other up." I placed the note where Chris expected to see a sushi delivery. My apartment key rested on top of it. Right then, my phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Chris. "We're 10 minutes away. Marissa is feeling better, but she's starving. Did you order the sushi? Also, can you transfer me $200? I want to buy a bottle of tequila for the house." For the house. Not our house. The house he assumed would continue existing in its current comfortable form, ready to serve Marissa's needs the way I had. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up my suitcases, pulled them out the door, and locked it for the last time. I took the elevator to the lobby where the Uber Black I had ordered waited at the curb. The driver loaded my bags and asked where I was headed. "The international terminal," I said. "And please play something upbeat." As we pulled away, the car turned onto the main road just as Chris's Honda entered the complex from the opposite direction. I watched them from the back seat, slouching down so they wouldn't see me. Chris animated every word with his hands, probably explaining how I was going to pay for Marissa's emotional getaway. Marissa in the passenger seat looked bored and entitled, like someone entitled to a luxury she hadn't earned. They had no idea that they were driving toward an apartment stripped bare, a declined joint card, and a note that would detonate the illusion they had built together on my back. At the airport hours later, I sat in the quiet glow of the United Polaris lounge. The air smelled like expensive cologne and polished leather. I sipped a glass of scotch and watched my phone light up with missed calls and frantic texts. "Where are you? Why is the TV gone? Is this a joke? Did we get robbed?" My card was declined for the sushi delivery. Marissa is hungry. Then the final message before the silence broke. "You can't just leave. We have a lease." I typed a single factual reply. "I paid the lease break fee. The apartment is yours if you can cover next month's rent. Utilities shut off at 8 a.m. Good luck." Then I blocked his number. I boarded my flight to Tokyo with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had finally stepped out of a burning building she spent years pretending wasn't on fire. Tokyo felt like a different planet compared to the suffocating apartment I had escaped. Neon lights reflected off wet pavement, crowds flowed like rivers through Shinjuku, and everywhere I turned, life moved with a sense of purpose I had forgotten existed. For the first time in years, I woke up without anxiety clenched in my stomach. I walked the city at midnight, visited shrines at dawn, enjoyed food without checking my phone to see whether Chris or Marissa needed something from me. I felt weightless. I turned on Do Not Disturb, allowing only family to pass through. Every other notification could wait. In the quiet of that boundary, I found myself again. By the 8th day of my trip, I was sitting in a tiny yakitori bar with an old college friend, David Chen, who had been working abroad for years. As the smoke curled up from the grill and the noise of the bar blended into a comforting hum, he leaned closer with a grin that meant he had news. "So David said pouring me a glass of sake, word from the grapevine is that Chris and Marissa imploded spectacularly." I raised an eyebrow. "Already?" "Oh, it didn't take long," he said. "You were the structural support beam in that apartment. Once it was gone, the whole thing collapsed." David explained that Chris had tried to keep the apartment, but quickly discovered that maintaining a downtown unit on his income without my support was nearly impossible. He begged Marissa to contribute something, anything. She responded by moving in fully, carrying only a duffel bag filled with mismatched clothes and art supplies. It didn't help his finances or his sanity. Within a week, the Wi-Fi was cut off because no one paid the bill. They ended up tethering off their phones, burning through data and patience. The electricity remained on only because the final notice hadn't arrived yet. Chris fell into a spiral of frustration that Marissa interpreted as negative masculine energy, which led to daily arguments between them. But the real blow came when Marissa brought a man home, a new creative soulmate she'd met at a bar while Chris was at work. She claimed the man inspired her inner femininity and needed a safe space for healing. When Chris returned to find them sitting on the couch eating the last of the groceries, the argument could be heard 2 floors down. Marissa accused Chris of limiting her emotional freedom. He accused her of using him. Neither of them was wrong. Listening to David recount the chaos felt surreal. These 2 people had demanded I fund their emotional retreat, yet within days of my departure, they turned on each other with a speed only parasites can achieve when the host disappears. Marissa eventually left, David said, finishing his drink. Took Chris's debit card on the way out. Ran up $600 gambling on some shady online casino. I blinked. That actually sounds tame for her. David laughed. True. But the best part, Marissa told people she left because Chris was draining her energy. I shook my head, amused but unsurprised. Parasites don't accept responsibility. They simply move on to a new host. After returning from Tokyo, I rebuilt my life with a precision I had honed from years of architectural planning. I found a modern loft with high ceilings, exposed brick, and a firm 3-day guest policy embedded into the lease. The space felt clean, not just physically, but emotionally. No stray crystals, no meditation cushions, no lingering tension belonging to another woman's moods. My finances recovered quickly now that I wasn't supporting 2 adults. I slept better. I cooked meals that actually stayed in the refrigerator long enough for me to eat them. The silence in my new home wasn't suffocating anymore. It was restorative. I assumed Chris would disappear from my orbit. Shame alone should have been enough to keep him away. For a while it was. The weeks stretched into months with no contact. The peace felt so complete that I almost convinced myself the story was finished. But narcissists never go quietly. Not when the person who fed them has walked away. Not when the supply has been severed so completely. It began on a Tuesday afternoon. I opened my email to find a subject line that read, "Urgent Tax Documents, W-2s." I clicked it, expecting a forwarded message from our old accountant. Instead, I found a 2,000-word letter written by Chris himself. There were no tax documents attached. He opened with guilt. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But ignoring me is childish. We built a life together, and you walked away without a conversation." Then came the revisionist history. "I never prioritized Marissa over you. I was just trying to support someone going through a hard time. You punished me for caring." And finally, the bait. "I just want closure. Can we meet for coffee? I have some of your mail, please." I didn't respond. 2 days later, he messaged me on LinkedIn, the one platform where blocking someone sends a visible signal. He sent a connection request with a note attached. "She stole from me. You were right. Please, I need someone to talk to." The validation tugged at something old and familiar. For a brief moment, the version of me who once worked herself raw, trying to fix him, stirred. But I didn't reply. A week later, I left my office building at 5:30 p.m., scrolling through my phone as I walked toward the parking garage. That was when a figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. "You look different," a voice said. I looked up to find Chris Miller standing there with a hollow expression I had never seen on him before. He looked smaller somehow, not physically but emotionally. His posture lacked the confidence he once had. His hair was unstyled, his clothes worn, his eyes tired. Marissa had drained him in every way possible. "Chris," I said, slowing my pace but keeping distance. "How did you know where I work?" "LinkedIn," he said, stepping beside me. "You updated your profile." I turned toward the garage. "What do you want?" He followed. "Closure. I want to apologize. You were right about everything." He swallowed, his voice trembling. "Marissa is gone. I kicked her out 2 months ago. She stole my debit card. She told me I was toxic when I confronted her. She said I sounded like you." I stopped walking. Chris looked at me with eyes full of heartbreak and desperation. For a moment, I waited to feel the old tug of responsibility, the instinct to fix him, to shoulder his pain. But nothing came. "Valerie," he whispered, "I have nothing left. I miss you. I miss the way you grounded me. Can we just talk, grab a coffee?" "No, Marissa, just us." He waited for me to say yes. The old Valerie might have. But the woman standing in front of him now knew better. "Chris," I said calmly, "I'm not getting coffee with you." He blinked. "Why? Because you're still punishing me." "No," I said, "because I don't know you anymore." It was the truth, and it hit him harder than any insult could have. Chris stared at me like I had spoken a foreign language. The idea that I no longer viewed him as someone familiar, someone safe, someone I owed something to, hit him harder than any accusation could. He took a small step forward, then paused when I didn't move to meet him. "What do you mean you don't know me?" he asked. "We lived together for 2 years, Valerie." "No," I said evenly. I lived with a man who treated me like a utility bill he could depend on. I lived with a man who expected me to finance his compassion for another woman. I lived with someone who looked me in the eye and told me to pay for Marissa's vacation, because her feelings mattered more than mine. His mouth tightened, and he looked away for a moment, ashamed. "I told you I was sorry about that," he whispered. "I was manipulated. She made me feel like I owed her everything. And you made me feel the same way I said. The difference is I stopped letting you." He looked stunned, as if the idea that I could simply walk away from the version of him I once tolerated was something he'd never considered. He rubbed his hands together, a nervous gesture I'd rarely seen on him. "I know I messed up," he said. "I know I took advantage of you, but you don't understand how hard things have been. After you left, everything fell apart. The apartment fell apart. My finances collapsed. Marissa drained me emotionally and financially. I'm in real debt now, Valerie. Real debt." There it was, the shift from apology to expectation, the subtle pivot into implying that I somehow held responsibility for his downfall. It was the tone I remembered from the early days, when compassion from me had been automatic. Only now it felt almost pathetic. He took a breath, bracing himself the way people do before making a request they know they shouldn't. "Can you hand him up, Miss? Even just a little. I need $500 to cover rent this month." My parents are driving me crazy. I just need time to get back on my feet. I watched him carefully. He really believed the request was reasonable. He genuinely thought I should feel obligated to help him. Chris, I said calmly, I'm not giving you money. His face twisted. So that's it? You're just going to walk away and leave me like this after everything we shared? We didn't share everything, I corrected. I funded everything. You're asking me to subsidize the consequences of the choices you made long after I walked away. He flinched as if I had struck him. You're being cruel. No, I said, I'm being clear. His eyes glimmered with a mix of anger, hurt, and desperation. You know, I really thought you would understand. I thought you would still care. I thought you were better than this. I exhaled slowly. I did care, I said. I cared until it nearly destroyed me. But I learned something important in the last few months. Caring doesn't mean sacrificing your entire identity for someone who can't reciprocate even the basics of respect. He shook his head. You're so cold, Valerie. You weren't like this. I wasn't allowed to be like this, I said. Every time I set a boundary, I was told I was selfish. Every time I tried to protect my own space, you framed it as me lacking empathy. You called me controlling for wanting privacy in my own home. You called me transactional for asking Marissa to contribute. You told me my needs didn't matter because hers were more fragile. He swallowed hard. His voice softened, almost crumbling. I was wrong, maybe I said. But apology or not, the damage is done. We stood there in the fading daylight of the garage entrance. The city noise hummed behind us, people rushing past with their own problems and their own lives. Chris looked smaller than I had ever seen him, not because of physical change, but because of the collapse of the narrative he had lived in. He had been the protector, the savior, the empathetic one. Now stripped of Marissa's chaos and my support, he was just a man who didn't know who he was without someone to carry him. He drew one last breath. Can we at least talk again? Maybe try to rebuild something. Just something. I don't want to lose you completely. There was a time when that plea would have shattered me, when I would have stepped toward him and softened my voice, ready to fix everything he had broken in himself. But that version of me was gone. I shook my head gently. Chris, I wish you well, truly, but I'm not your partner, your rescuer, or your safety net. Not anymore. His face hardened with anger again, a last defense mechanism against the truth. Fine. I hope you end up alone, he snapped. I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. I was alone for 2 years while living with you, I said, and I've been alone for 4 months now, and I've never been happier. He stared at me, unable to respond. I stepped back ready to walk into the parking garage when he called out one last time, voice cracking. Please, Valerie, just loan me the money. I'll pay you back. I swear. Please. I paused, turned, looked at him for exactly what he was, a man seeking the easiest exit from a mess of his own creation. Ask Marissa, I said. His mouth fell open slightly, not in shock, but in recognition. He knew he couldn't ask her. He knew she'd taken too much already. And he knew that I wasn't coming back. Without another word, I turned and headed toward the quiet echo of the garage, my heels tapping lightly against the concrete. He didn't follow. Even if he wanted to, he couldn't. Emotionally, financially, psychologically, he had nothing left to pull me with. I reached my car, got inside, and drove home without looking back. 6 months passed before I heard anything new about Chris or Marissa. By then, my life looked nothing like the one I had left behind. My loft was quiet, bright, and filled with things that were mine. Things I had chosen intentionally without anyone else's chaos bleeding into the corners. I woke up in the mornings without tension curled in my ribs. I went to the gym, consistently cooked meals for myself, worked on projects that excited me, and felt the ease of a life finally under my control. But gossip has a way of finding you, especially when it smells like consequences. David updated me during one of our monthly catch-up calls. According to people back home, Chris had moved back in with his parents in the suburbs. After I left, Marissa drained him financially and emotionally to the point where he was months behind on every bill. She brought around a new younger man, a 19-year-old art student who apparently had a trust fund and impressionable self-esteem. Marissa framed herself as this student's mentor, which was her way of justifying why he stayed over for days at a time, eating food Chris could barely afford and drinking the last of his liquor. When Chris confronted her, she called him oppressive and accused him of sabotaging her creative energy. Not long after that, she vanished from his life entirely, leaving him with debt in his name and not a shred of accountability. Chris tried to stay in the apartment for another month, but without my income stabilizing the household, it became impossible. He packed up his things, broke the lease the hard way, and returned to the bedroom he'd once used as a teenager. Meanwhile, Marissa reinvented her persona again. She attached herself to her new student protege, posting pictures that painted her as a misunderstood artist, finally appreciated for her vision. No apology, no reflection, no accountability, just a new host. Hearing all of this stirred no anger, no satisfaction, and no bitterness inside me, just distance. I had stepped out of that story months before it finished collapsing. I wasn't a part of the aftermath. I didn't want to be. Their meltdown had nothing to do with me. It was the inevitable outcome of a dynamic I had been holding upright by myself. My life had expanded in ways I hadn't expected. The biggest shift came 3 months after moving into my loft when I met Elijah Carter at a small independent bookstore near my office. He was standing in front of the architectural history section, thumbing through the same book I had been searching for. We struck up a conversation so easily I didn't realize 30 minutes had passed until my phone buzzed with a meeting reminder. Elijah was an architect too sharp, thoughtful, funny, in a quiet way. When we began spending time together, I braced myself for old patterns. I waited for the moment he would expect me to accommodate his whims or his crises, or for him to lean on my stability as a replacement for his own. But that moment never came. The first time we booked a trip together to the Swiss Alps, a place I had once only dreamed of visiting, I instinctively reached for my card to cover the full cost. Old muscle memory. Elijah gently placed his hand over mine. "What are you doing?" he asked. Getting the tickets, I answered, caught off guard. He laughed and shook his head, pulling out his own card. "I've got my own miles. We can split the hotel." The simplicity of it, the fairness, the partnership hit me harder than anything Chris had ever said. I found myself staring at Elijah for a second, unable to disguise the bewilderment. He raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" "Yes," I said, and for once it felt unquestionably true. "I'm great." On the day of our departure, I sat in the lounge at JFK waiting for our flight. I looked at my phone one last time before switching it to airplane mode. There were no frantic messages, no guilt trips, no emotional emergencies, just a peaceful screen. I thought back briefly to the note I had left on the kitchen counter in that half-empty apartment. "Marissa is single now. So are you. You can cheer each other up." It was the truest thing I had ever written at the time, but it had left out one last line, one I finally understood now as I gathered my things to board the plane. I was single too. And for the first time in my life, I was free. As Elijah walked toward me with our boarding passes, he gave me a small smile, one that felt warm and grounded and real.